of the book, The Signal and the Noise, Why So Many Predictions Fail, but some don't.
Well.
And it's very good to have you on the show
Yours
this
didn't
morning.
fail this time. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Joe.
Very good to have you here. By the way, we didn't bet because we love humanity too much to bet, but I think we gave money, and we made a contribution.
That's
Mika,
nice. That's really
in
very,
Nate's
very
name.
nice.
To AmeriCares, by the way.
It is a good, when I talk to friends I have down in New Jersey, I mean, people I think don't necessarily realize how
The
devastating
scope.
the storm was, yeah.
It was, I still think, I was looking at pictures last night on Facebook. My husband Facebooks.
Yeah.
With Channel 7, and I don't Facebook. I was learning about that. He was showing me the pictures that he was posting on Facebook. It is unbelievable. Still, the damage and destruction, and the people who are left out in the cold, the people who are still hungry
It's
from the effects of.
By the way, AmeriCares does great work.
AmeriCares we love.
So we've got a lot to talk about.
Sure.
But the first thing I want to do, before your apology to me, the
Right.
first thing I want to do
And don't,
is
that's okay.
let's sell books.
Let's not even bother.
Hold on, stop.
Don't worry about it.
Let's sell books. So talk about, first of all, the book, The Signal and the Noise. What's it about?
Well, so we live in a very information-rich world. You can think of all the polls that we get now, and we need better strategies for how we sort through that information to find signal, I call it, or find meaning or truth or make good predictions, etc. So the book's about that. And we talk to people in every field from finance to earthquake prediction, about who's kind of taking, in a data-rich world, who's actually making sense of it all.
So let's talk about the last election. You know, your numbers turned out to be right because the state polls that you weighted turned out to be right. I want to ask you about, and we talk about this a lot in our speeches now, when we go to college campuses or wherever, and it seems to me what happened on the right this year was there was a certain pollster who would come out with a poll.
Sure.
Then there was a certain website that would put it at the top of the poll.
Yeah.
Then there was a certain network that would run that story.
Sure.
For a day. So what we kept asking Chuck Todd was like, Chuck, what's going on? Your poll. But anyway, you sorted through the polls for the 2010 cycle. You talked about which ones worked, which ones didn't. Let's talk about the best polls first of all. And secondly, talk about why some of these automated polls, like PPP,
Sure.
actually turning in great results.
Well, look, most of the major network polls are pretty good. The NBC Wall Street Journal poll is a terrific poll. The ABC Washington Post poll, the CBS New York Times poll, of course. I think that high-quality polling really differentiates itself now because if you take an automated poll, you miss people who have cell phones, which is about a third of the population now, and they're mostly, younger, urban demographic, mostly Democrats, so you will undersample Democrats to use that buzzword if you don't call people who have cell phones, and lo and behold, those polls had a Republican bias this year. Not because the pollsters are evil partisans, but because, hey, if you miss a big chunk of the population who's Democratic leaning, you're going to have problems.
There are also the assumptions you have to make. The thing I kept hearing from Republican pollsters, from the Romney people, I'm sure you heard it all the time too, is you guys are going +8, +9
Sure.
with the Democrats. How do you make those assumptions? Because Gallup just absolutely humiliated themselves because I think they went +3 or +4 instead of +7, +8.
Well, here's the issue. The best pollsters, like NBC, Wall Street Journal, CBS, New York Times, they let the sample tell you what it is by themselves, right? They're not making any assumptions at all about how many Democrats or Republicans should there be. It turned out the pollsters that didn't put their finger on the scale just said, well, we seem to be hearing from more Hispanics than we did 4 years ago, for example, right? We seem to be hearing a lot of people who are Democratic leaning, whereas Republicans might identify as independents now. So just going with what the data says instead of making assumptions is usually the best practice whenever you're doing any kind of scientific survey, and that worked again this year.
So tell us what you do and tell us what you did this past year that made you right and a lot of other people. And for the record, I said, I did say that Obama was going to win. I think when we turned sideways, it was like a week and a half out. You were putting it like 74%.
Sure.
And the politician in me was saying, you never know what's going to happen. Just like with baseball, the numbers may look right. But certain team ball players may eat fried chicken and drink beer in the locker room. Anything can happen. But talk about what you do.
So what we're really doing is taking the polls, and you kind of take an average, that part's pretty simple, but translate it into probabilities. So it's the same as in a football game. If it's team has a field goal lead
Right.
with 5 minutes left to play, how often will they win? And we're doing it about the same way, right? Where by the end of the campaign, Obama was up by 3 points in Ohio, Virginia, Iowa, other swing states, and that's usually pretty solid. There's a chance of a big mistake like you had in 1980, but it was about a 10% chance and not a 50% chance.
Right.
Of course, things did solidify for him toward the end where you were seeing consistently in almost every poll.
He bumped back up, especially at the
It looked like people say, oh, races break toward against the incumbent. This race broke toward the incumbent, whether because of Sandy or anything else. You really did see him have more of a cushion toward the end of the campaign.
You tried to put a number on Sandy, the impact that Sandy had. What did you put it, like maybe 1.5 points?
Maybe a point or point and a half. I mean, now that we see Obama's won by actually more than 3 points in the national popular vote and more in some of the states, I think you can't say he won the election because of the storm.
Right.
It made things a lot more comfortable, certainly.
Mark?
So anyone who writes or talks about politics gets criticized these days in one form or another. One thing about politics that all of us here like, we like issues and substance and the importance of the election for the real lives of real people, but we all like the horse race. We all like to try to figure out who's going to win and look at a lot of polls. There's one strand of criticism that some people make that say too much horse race coverage in politics, too much focus on who's going to win rather than the underlying issues. What do you say to that?
Well, look, I'm a pro horse race guy. I'm more interested in diagnosing 2016 now than Benghazi, for example, because that's where my kind of bread is buttered.
Thank you anyway for being honest on that.
Yeah, but if you're gonna do horse race, then do it the right way. And one reason why I like the horse race is because it can be more data driven. Even now we're looking at, we had a post on 2014, for example, how the history would work against Democrats retaking the House in 2014 because the president's party doesn't do well in midterms. So making all the coverage more data driven, we saw, I think, in baseball where things have kind of come full circle now, where the scouts, you still have scouts, but they know the stats, and that makes them better scouts. They know where to add value on top of that. So if we can make the baseline for horse race coverage 20%, 50% more data-driven, then I think we'll have improvement all around.
John, you're like, obviously you follow politics in really in a pretty thorough way, right? I mean, one of the things that to kind of go from what Mark was just talking about that I find sort of curious is that people who often attack horse race journalism are also huge fans of your work.
Yeah.
How is it that you can reconcile that notion? I mean, to my mind, what you do is the purest distillation of horse race journalism. So it seems strange to me that some people attack horse race journalism and also love Nate Silver at the same time.
Well, it's like one of these terms that can be used in a pejorative way, and sometimes I've used it in a pejorative way myself. If you want to say, oh, everything that's not what I do, right, is horse race journalism, it's bad.
You know, that's what I say, by the way.
Yeah.
What I say. Everything that I'm sorry, go ahead.
But, you know, I do think if you distill it to the essence of the question, right, which is who's going to win, and there's truth in advertising here, right? We have these probabilities up on the side, and who's going to win the Senate, who's going to win the House, who's going to win the presidency, right? So you distill it down to 3 numbers, right? In some ways, it's more efficient, I think. And you, of course, you explain how you get there, and we talk in great detail every day about why we think what we do and why the models that we have are coming up with the numbers that they do. But in some ways, you stop beating around the bush so much and say, here's the distilled essence, right? 72% is, you know, Democrats' odds of keeping the Senate or whatever, or 89% Obama's odds of winning Ohio, etc. It makes things, I think, easier in a way when people are trying to figure out how can I spend my time efficiently to get information.
And I will just say in your book here, you have what's called the prediction paradox. The more humility we have about our ability to make predictions, the more we can accept we don't know everything, the more successful we can be in planning the future.
Well, and again, comes from I used to play a lot of poker, and as a sports fan, you know, as a sports fan, that you're going to be humbled sooner or later.
Right, it happens. Right.
Yeah. Sometimes your team will be the number 2 seed that gets upset by the 15 in the NCAA tournament, right? And so you get a better intuitive sense for what these probabilities are and what these odds are. You know, you have to make the best bets you can, given the information that you have, knowing that you're going to be wrong sometimes. We missed a Senate race in North Dakota where we had the Democrat with only an 8% chance of winning, and she won. Thankfully, it's a low-profile race, so I don't get scrutinized for that too much. But that was the same chance we had Romney with a 10% chance, right?
And again, it's so fluid. It's like whether it's poker or whether it's baseball or whether it's politics, it's so fluid. If Romney had found his voice 2 weeks out and started becoming the candidate of all candidates, the state polls moved, your probabilities moved, but that didn't happen. I think what surprised me the most about this election is how static it actually was the last 2 weeks. And as you go into the final weekend and you see the president sitting at +1 or +2 in a lot of swing states, +4, +5 in Ohio, this was one of the more static presidential races we've had in a while.
It really was. I mean, people forget about races like 92, where you had Perot going in and out, and the polls gyrating all over the place. But, in fact, so we had, in 49 of the 50 states, we had the right candidate winning in June. We had Florida for Romney back in June, based on what the polls were then.
Isn't that crazy?
Right? So that's how stable it was. We know, first of all, how about 45 states are going to vote, so you shouldn't get any credit for predicting Vermont or Utah, of course, right? But it was basically a two-point campaign. If you had gotten really great jobs news, maybe Obama would have won by more. If you had more bad jobs news, maybe he would have lost.
Were you surprised by how off the Romney people were? I mean, Mitt Romney on election night thought he was going to win based on what his pollsters told him. His wife thought even late into election night they were going to win. Are you surprised?
Well, look, I think sometimes campaigns put on a certain spin for the press, of course. And when I talked to the Romney campaign, I always thought they had a pretty realistic view of where they stood. And maybe they're talking to me in a way that's more direct because I'm not going to go out and do a lot of reporting on it, right? But I think Neil Newhouse, the pollster there, I think those guys are pretty smart guys who took a frankly a B- C+ candidate, ran a pretty close campaign. It's tough to beat an incumbent when Obama got some of the jobs numbers he wanted late in the cycle. I think their campaign was adequate, was fine. It's tough to beat an incumbent, as I think we found out this year, and people very often forget. Even very vulnerable incumbents, Harry Reid won re-election 2 years ago. It's still a powerful advantage.
The book is The Signal and the Noise. Nate Silver.
Nate, thank you for being here.
Good to have you on the show.